Ladies and gentlemen, fellow councillors, I'll just look to Tommy. Tommy, are you ready to roll? Right, thank you. I welcome everybody here for the full council meeting held tonight on the 27th of April. Please take note of what's on the screen above if we're not intending to have a fire drill. So if we do hear the fire alarm, then obviously it is something. So please make your way out back over to the car park as safely as possible. Right, okay, thank you. I'm going to start the meeting on apologies, please.
Yes, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Slack, Gretorix, Hill, Mrs Morley and Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. And Councillor Cruz. Thank you. Item 2, public participation. I have in front of me 3 people who wish to speak. So I will like to invite Councillor Vicky Rains, Chair of Tansey Parish Council, to make a statement. Please note you have 3 minutes. Thank you to do that.
Good evening. The site at Nab Hall does not conform to government guidance for a traveller's site. Furthermore, it was known by this council that the site was a location of an old badger set. The creatures often return to their historic homes, which is the case at Nab Hall. Work near a badger set must be carried out between July and November inclusive. Derbyshire Dales worked without licence in December to include the use of heavy machinery adjacent to the set. An inadequate buffer zone was identified by Rural Crime, who also encouraged the council to seek mitigation. Originally a quarry for roadstone, the land should have passed to DCC Highways. We have not received any proof of legal transfer to Derbyshire Dales. Maybe this can be provided. A land registry letter to our solicitors states customary rights bind the land on first registration. Overriding interests bind the land despite the absence of any express note of any burden on the register. The original award was in the form of a trust, so the land was differentiated for this allotment. There is no evidence provided to support the lifting of this trust. To continue to waste taxpayers' money on this ill-conceived project will be vigorously contested by the Parish Council, who have been disappointed by the apparent lack of integrity and transparency shown to our community. Although not in the travellers' favoured location of Ashbourne, a site is available on the A6 at Holmesford. It will accommodate several pitches, has hard standing, services, is discreet, and is near shops and welfare facilities. It will also be good value for the taxpayer. I hope officers will investigate this site once more and hopefully be able to tap into government grants to progress a speedy outcome for the travellers and Dales residents. If this is pursued, it will prove lead by example. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next, I'd like to call up Mr. John Wyatt, a local resident. Thank you. Hewitt, sorry, beg my pardon.
Hello, is that working? Chairman and councillors, before 2013, the council commissioned an extensive search for travellers' sites. It found 13 and rated the Woodyard at Holmesford top of the list. In 2013, the council's corporate committee resolved to adopt the Woodyard as its preferred site for permanent provision, at that time for 6 pitches. In the event, an application for only 3 pitches was submitted and approved for only 3 years. This permission is still valid, but commercially useless. Under threat of a High Court penalty, Council proposed a site at Roseley. That didn't work. Followed by sites at Ashbourne, Wirksworth, Clifton, and Tansley, and meanwhile chasing unauthorised encampments around the district. I've asked for the total cost of that chase. Taxpayers have paid for council's costs, police and courts. In case leaders continue to quote the dismissed appeal, it is long outdated. It was criticised by Mr. Yarwood, the appellant, generally, and specifically relied on the Ashbourne site, which is no longer available. So it's irrelevant on two grounds. It's out of date and will be included, if relevant, in the report on the new application. So please, abandon Tansley. Revert to the 2013 decision. Re-adopt the woodyard. Apply for the grants, but don't delay. The woodyard is shovel ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next member to speak is Mr. Mark Johnson, a local resident.
Thank you. Good evening. I grew up on Nab Hall Lane, and in spring I would often watch the Badger Cubs playing on this site. I used to climb one of the mature beech trees there, and at that time it was home to a very well established badger set with 8 or even 9 entrances, until 2007, when the site was bulldozed by a squatter. Which brings me to my question. In view of the huge expense associated with developing Nab Hall Lane and the fact that badgers are returning to a traditional homeland, would the council consider earmarking this site as a wildlife habitat, which was Derbyshire Dales District Council's intention in the 1990s, when the site's boundary walls were rebuilt, complete with badger runs, and further trees were planted within the site. In 1999, the Secretary of State for the Environment approved the site for the release of barn owls. This was successful, and barn owls still frequent the box that you can see in the tall Scots pines bordering the site. Habitats everywhere are under increasing pressure. It is Mr. Badger phoning in to agree that habitats everywhere are under increasing pressure. Would the council agree that now more than ever we need to provide for wildlife? And if this site is unsuitable for development, would they please consider returning it to what it had become? A home for little owls, barn owls, willow warblers, and badgers, to name but a few. This year it's the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and to celebrate the occasion, trees are being planted throughout Britain. And I wonder if Nab Hall Lane could take this opportunity to contribute to what's called the Queen's Green Canopy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Johnson. Okay, we will move on. Item 3, approval of minutes of previous meetings. Do I find a proposer for the minutes? Councillor Shirley, a seconder. Councillor Atkins, all in favour, please show. Thank you, that's carried, thank you. Item 4, members' interests. Is there anybody who wishes to declare any interests this evening. Thank you for that, Mr. Morley, Councillor Morley. Anybody else wishing to make any comments, any declarations? No? Okay, thank you. Item 5, leaders' announcements. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. We meet to conduct our business this evening, Wednesday, 27th of April 2022 at the Town Hall in Matlock. But it's a surreal world that we live in. Whilst the Ukraine flag flies from our mast in front of the Town Hall, I cannot but help think of the over 7 million Ukrainian people that have been displaced from their homes. Thousands have been dealt with in the most barbaric of ways, transported away from their homeland, raped, tortured and murdered, and the revealing of mass graves. And whilst I'm pleased to hear of the support that the UK, the USA and some other countries are providing to Ukraine, we now live under the threat from Mr. Putin of the UK being bombed by a nuclear weapon later this year. The other concern is that there's going to be a world food shortage, and that in itself will bring not only much higher food prices for us all, but a breakdown of society in some parts of the world as the poorer countries starve. It really puts into perspective what we concern ourselves with this evening. And I have to ask what more can be done to stop this war, more especially what can be done to stop the threat of a madman bringing nuclear war to us all. I admit we are but a small and perhaps insignificant speck in this world issue, but I believe we have a voice. And I ask therefore you members to ponder on what I've just said and to consider what more can be done. I don't want thoughts now. I'd like and welcome any thoughts next week, 2 weeks, to see if we can come some consensus of thought what this authority's voice can say on this issue, and perhaps spread that message throughout the rest of the other local authorities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Item 6, Chairman's announcements. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. On a slightly more upbeat note, on the 28th of March, I represented the Council at Chatsworth House stakeholder event in the company of my wife. It was a very enjoyable evening hosted by the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. On the 2nd of April, myself and my wife attended the opening of the Wellspring Church in Wirksworth at the request of Councillor Slack. This was a really well-attended event, and it was to reopen the Methodist Church and to highlight the new modern annex. And it was a really lovely event, and they've made a cracking job of it up there, I've got to say. On the 23rd of April, I represented the Council at St George's Day concert in the Painted Hall at Chatsworth House, hosted by the Earl of Burlington. This event showcased inspirational performances by musicians from North Derbyshire, including the Peak Performance Choir and a trio of 2 flautists and the cellist. It was a really, I think that's going to be what I will reflect on as the highlight of my chairmanship. It was a really lovely event, and we are blessed to have Chatsworth House as the jewel in the crown of the Derbyshire Dale. I'd also like to add, because this might be the last time I get to speak and say anything, I've also recently attended Bakewell Market on 3 occasions. That isn't to shop, it's to collect for the air ambulance, and I'd like to thank Councillor Mark Wakeman and other members of his Royal British Legion group for assisting me there. We've collected good amounts of money, and I've also collected at Matlock Town football ground. And like you say, obviously my term as chair ceases on the 26th of May, and just to let everybody give fair warning, I'll be sending everybody an email with a link and a QR code to my Just Giving page if any councillors, members would like to donate before the end of my tenure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wayne. Item 7, to receive the non-exempt minutes of committees shown below. Do I find a seconder? Councillor Donnelly. All those in favour, please show. Yeah, thank you very much. That's moved. Item 8, Questions? I don't believe there are any questions. Thank you. Item 9, proposal on notice of a motion. So I will lead over to Councillor Swindle to put this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just for the benefit of anybody listening to tonight, I'll just read the motion out. The motions I've tabled is that this council recognises the hard work and dedication shown by our district council staff during the recent floods across the Derbyshire Dales. We express our sincere thanks and gratitude for their efforts in safeguarding, protecting our residents' homes and businesses. I'll try to be brief because I know we've got a lot of business on tonight, but Chair, the floods that hit the Derbyshire Dales in February of this year were devastating for many people, businesses and homes, and sadly these events are now all a bit too frequent. I hope that everybody has since got back on their feet and recovered as best they can. Not every member in this chamber has a ward that is impacted by flooding, but those who do will know firsthand that our staff rise up to the challenge and are at the forefront of defending homes, people and businesses across the Dales. During the floods, they work tirelessly, they work hard and with great commitment and selflessness, but also with bravery, as past floods have demonstrated the risks and dangers our staff face during the floods. This is all in the selfless service of our communities and our residents know that they are in good hands. So tonight I want this council to formally show our staff our gratitude and thanks for all that they have done to help during the recent floods and past floods as well. That includes staff who man the phones, staff who fill sandbags and provide the sandbags to our communities, checking in on the vulnerable, our officers and our CEO who lead and direct the council's efforts to help our communities, our staff who work through the night, some staff coming off annual leave to help, staff coming off of their regular jobs and then turning up for work the next day to get back on with their regular job. And no doubt some of those will not get those hours back. And then there's also Jim and his team on the fabulous communications that they provide, keeping our residents updated. But we also need to remember our emergency services, county council staff, town and parish council staff and councillors as well, who also assisted. If I can take the opportunity just to give my personal thanks to staff who helped in my ward, where Darley Bridge was impacted by the floods, not just this time, but over past floods as well. I don't mean to miss anybody out, but Ash Watts, Antonia Griffiths, Ross Hessian, Jim Fern, Becky Bryan and Helen Spencer, who all of my constituents are deeply grateful for what they did. To our staff, I don't have the power to give you a pay rise or a bonus. This motion is the best I can do to show my thanks and express the thanks from communities across the Derbyshire Dales and from all the members of this council. And particularly for the work you've done in Darley Bridge for me, I want to say thank you on behalf of all of my constituents. Whatever anybody thinks of this council, the decisions we make or take, or what they think of us as councillors, there is one thing that everybody can agree on, and that our staff are the best and we can be proud of the service they give to the residents. Motions are often debated, but I don't think there is a need to debate this one. But I'm sure members will wish to express their thanks on behalf of the communities they represent. And after the debate, Chair, I think it would be fitting to have a round of applause to our staff. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Swindle. Do we have a seconder to this motion?
I'd like to second that, if I may, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy.
I'd like to thank Councillor Swindell for bringing this motion, and it's essentially, sadly, a repeat of the hard work that our staff committed in the floods in November 2019, when I know that some of them worked over 36 hours. They have got a high reputation for their work in the community, but it is important that it's recognised in this chamber as well. And so I'm happy to second and thank Councillor Swindell again, Chair, and happy to give our staff applause. I wish we could get them a pay rise, but we can't.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wayne, would you like to make any comment?
Can I third it then?
Yeah. Why not?
No, I'd like to. It's a shame that we didn't get it on the agenda when it was more relevant back in March time. But I think what happens is people tend to forget that it's often the same people doing different roles, and the public don't understand that. And I think we need to be a bit slicker at getting that out there. One time you can be dealing with waste, Serco, which we may be discussing later. But at the end of the day, we can be discussing those sorts of things. And then immediately in the evening, there can be a flood alert or a flood warning, and you're doing something else, and it's the same people. And we've got a very resilient workforce, and I wish to echo the comments made by Councillor Swindell and Councillor Purdy, and congratulate them, and I'll gladly give you 5 minutes of applause if you want, but thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, Councillor Swindell spoke very eloquently about the ward that he represents, and I think it's only right that I should just mention that we're very grateful in Matlock for the work and for the efforts of our staff on many occasions, but especially through flooding. We seem to live with this nowadays. It used to be every 10 years, now it seems to be every couple of years, and that puts a strain on everybody, businesses, the public, our officers, the lot. And that to me signifies a partnership to overcome the problems that we're having. And I just want to remind our staff that, you know, in Matlock we do have an excellent flood warden in Councillor Wayne. We have a town council that is willing to put their penneth in effort to help out whenever we can, councillors as well as staff. So it is a partnership, but I think the thanks that Councillor Swindell has made to individual officers, and I'm not going to try and put their names forward because there are too many to thank, but very much support this motion.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Raw.
Yes, I just want to thank Councillor Wayne for Swindell even, sorry, for putting the proposal forward. It strikes me that what this council needs is a flood prevention plan. I've sat in this chamber and debated things like fires on our moorland and the reduction of our peat, which reduces flooding. And we need some joined up thinking that will stop some of the recurring floods that we have in the area.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I represent a ward that only very infrequently suffers from flooding, but there is that potential there. And one of the things I'm very grateful for is that I know that I can call on help from the staff of this council. And I think that's the great thing to remember, that we do have a dedicated team of staff and officers who are willing to turn out when requested and to give service over and above their contractual duties, as it were. Extremely reassuring, I can tell you, to know that you know, I can pick up the phone and call upon their assistance. So I'd like to just to public record my thanks and support for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe. Councillor Wakeman.
Yes, I'd like to echo the words that everyone else has said. Excellent service we get from them. Too many to mention. You know, thank you very much from the Bakewell ward.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeman. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to express my appreciation as well. And having been out late at night and early in the morning and finding that council officers were there present at the times that I was out and about, in Matlock during the flooding, I would like to just echo the comments that people have made about staying up late, working overnight, and then doing the day job in the day, which is a tremendously difficult to do. And I'd also like to draw attention to the work the Environment Agency has done and continues to do in ensuring that parts of Matlock don't flood, particularly the pumping station at Knowlston Place. And just draw your attention to the fact that when the flooding was happening, the Environment Agency couldn't, for a time, get the floodgates closed. And the water was lapping over the edge of the park in Knowlston Place, and there was a danger that it would actually flood Knowlston Place. But fortunately, they managed to get the gates to close in time, and the water was then pumped out from the Bentley Brook in Knowlston Place, and flooding was alleviated. But it was touch and go. So thank you to all of the staff who take part in these what are now regular events, and thank you also to the emergency services and to the people from Severn Trent and the Environment Agency who are doing their jobs as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Is there any other members wishing to make any comments? I would just like to make a comment and just say thank you, Councillor Swindle, for bringing this. I do apologise that we didn't get it on the last meeting. It is something that is very notable for everybody to take on board. The one thing I would say is whenever there's an adverse problem, we all do come together, community, staff, members and everything else. So I thank you. But yes, a big praise and thank you to the members, the staff who do the work that they do. Thank you. So with that, I will take on the time of having a round of applause. Sorry, I've been told we've got to vote as well. I thought it was more of a, yeah, thank you, but there we go. So all in favour to what has been put? Thank you. Unanimous. I thought it would be. We move on, thank you, to item 10. So with this, I'll just wait for Councillor Morley leaving the room. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, this is a report by the monitoring officer who has received notification from Councillor Michelle Morley for a dispensation due to medical reasons. You will note from the report that if granted, this 6-month period would end on the 6th of November 2022. I don't think there's much more to add to that, as all the information is contained in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations. There's no comment or debate needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Find a seconder. Councillor Finesse.
I'd like to second, Chair.
Thank you. All those in favour?
I don't know the ins and outs of this because it's a medical, but I hope that we do show our respect for Councillor Michelle Morley and wish her well in the coming months.
Thank you. That has been taken on board. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Thank you. Can someone... Sorry, you didn't even get a chance to sit down. Thank you, Councillor Morley, for that. Thank you, Councillor Swindle. Okay, Item 11, the council tax discretionary discounts. I'll move to Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this is quite a straightforward report. I'm asking members to approve 2 changes to the Council's policy for discretionary council tax discounts. These 2 changes will allow more flexibility to backdate awards to care leavers, and we're adding an appeal process for dissatisfied applicants. I'd like to reassure members that we don't get too many dissatisfied applicants, but there were 2 cases last year that initially were going, well, they did go to the tribunal, but later withdrew their cases. During that process, the council's solicitor, Lee Gardner, recommended that we should add an appeals process to our policy. The other change that I'm seeking approval for is to add a new class of discount to compensate those who might house homes for Ukraine people so that they don't lose their council tax support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Raw.
Can I ask that we put an amendment in there that it's in relation to refugees as opposed to Ukrainian refugees, because there might be other refugees from Syria and other countries. So I don't think we should make it specific to just Ukrainian refugees. Thank you.
Karen, yeah.
We can do that by all means, but you need to be aware that the legislation that the government and the guidance that they've given us does only relate to homes for Ukraine. If we were to introduce it for any refugee, which members can, the financial impact is that the whole of any such discounts would be borne by Derbyshire Dales District Council, whereas the government have created a special circumstance where all preceptors will bear the cost. So the bulk of the cost of the Ukrainian refugee will go to the county council and be shared amongst preceptors. All other discounts are wholly borne by the district council.
How do we cover this in the Equalities Impact Assessment?
I would say that we're just mirroring the government's guidance.
Which is something that provides unequal status to refugees, which I think is something I would feel uncomfortable supporting.
Okay. Can I ask Rob to come in on this?
Through you, Chair, thank you. The model for accommodating refugees that aren't Ukrainian is in their own properties through housing associations or social landlords. So the council tax issue wouldn't be relevant to them, where they'd be sharing a property with an English family, effectively. So in that circumstance, it wouldn't apply. But well, just to be clear, so Syrians and others who have come to the UK through the UK resettlement scheme are housed in single properties on their own. They're not hosted by an English family. That model doesn't exist for...
I've just been speaking to a friend
Excuse me, can I just ask, do you want to put this as an amendment, and in which case can you say how the amendment you wish it to go forward as, and then we'll move on from that instead of asking questions back and forth with this. These are individual. So is it an amendment you wish to make?
Yes.
Then can
I'd
you
like
state
to delete the word Ukrainian and just use the word refugees.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Alice. Councillor... Sorry? Sorry? Yeah, it is. It's in item 2.
Chair, can I just clarify? Are we talking about the removal of the word Ukrainian from the policy and therefore, and also the homes for Ukrainian related increase? Is that what you're seeking?
I'm welcome to any suggestion, but I don't want this. My feeling is that as this policy stands, it's unequal. And if I was writing an equalities impact assessment on it, I'd be very concerned. And I know we have a national government that does things that are very unequal. But as a council, I personally don't feel we can reflect that. So any suggested wording that opens up this to other refugees is fine by me. Whatever appropriate wording you feel you can put in.
If I can just explain, it isn't the refugees that will get the benefit of this discount, it's the host family.
I understand that, but any host family that's hosting refugees should be able to claim this benefit, and not just because they can't claim in for, because they've got Ukrainian refugees.
Chair, may I suggest that to put into that effect that recommendation 2 says to offset a homes for Ukraine related increase in council tax. The amendment would be to remove the words homes for Ukraine and just replace that with refugee. I think that would do what is intended. So it would be to provide to offset a refugee-related increase in council tax liability.
Will that work in the criteria of what the government has stated? No.
It wouldn't, but that's the proposed amendment.
Right, okay. Just to ask that question, just so that we all knew that.
Chair, I can't support this amendment. We're dealing with a specific act here, and all of the refugees are catered for under other specific acts. And what Councillor Roy is asking this council to do is take on a huge financial liability, which is too risky. This is specific, and it's the way that I think we should vote with the officer's recommendations. And I take due note of our finance officer, Karen Erickson's advice.
Thank you, Chair. I think I can see what Councillor Rowe's trying to do, but I wonder whether the wording in this is a little bit, I wouldn't say misleading, but I was a bit confused when Councillor Rowe raised it. My understanding is, so please tell me if I'm wrong, that the Homes for Ukraine scheme creates an increase for those people who are housing people from the Ukraine. And what the council's trying to do is offset that. And give them a discount so they don't have that. I don't know if we have enough information to know whether a home housing a refugee, or any refugee from any status, has the same increase. So I don't know how we can create a discount if we don't know it needs a discount. I might be wrong, and I don't know, and I'm asking through ignorance. So if you could clarify that, it would help me enormously. Thank you.
Karen, have you got an answer to that?
Well, Councillor Salt's correct. The purpose of this discount is if a family hosts Ukrainian refugees, then potentially the income of the host family could go up. Firstly, because they stand to receive the £350 thank you payment from the government. And secondly, in case the refugees then gain income either through benefits or through work, in assessing entitlement for council tax support, normally the whole household's income has to be taken into account. The result of that would be to put up the income and then that would reduce the amount of council tax support the host family would receive, putting up their council tax bill. So this discount is intended to offset any increase in the council tax bill for the host family and to protect that. what we're saying is that the government has set up an entirely different arrangement for Ukrainian refugees than what it had for other refugees. The other refugees have not been housed with host families. They've been provided with their own accommodation. And that's why the government just directed this at the specific arrangements for Ukrainian families. Rob, have you got anything you need to add?
I think Karen summed it up very well, but in terms of risk, there are only 11 families who aren't Ukrainian refugees in the Derbyshire Dales, and there'll probably be over 70 Ukrainian families in the Derbyshire Dales at the moment. So to give you a sense of the risk, that's the kind of numbers we're talking about. But
Can I ask, what is your problem over there? Sorry. Councillor Gamble, Councillor Allison. Yeah, well, can you be a bit quieter then, please? I think you've been disrespectful to what's going off. Yes, I'll put you down on the list. Thank you. Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. Seem to be making heavy weather a simple solution here. The questions I was going to ask are the two main bullet points of why we want to do this, and the one is to allow more flexibility, and one can understand why we want to do that. The second bullet point was that we had an appeals process, which got me thinking, do we not have a appeals process in place for the present policy? If not, why not? And I hope that any policy that we put down for appeals is less council jargon, because appeal processes can be rigorous, they can be slow, and they can be demanding for those that are wanting to appeal. And I'm just thinking that, you know, we want to make the process as simple as we can for those in difficult.
Right.
Point of order. I think we have an amendment proposed and seconded. Therefore, we should be debating the amendment.
Sorry, Chair. I am talking about the amendment because that is my next word.
Well, I think that wasn't about the amendment. That was about the appeals process, whereas the amendment is about who.
Well, the appeals is on there as well, even if in the new amendment. But okay, fine.
Thank you,
I'm
Chair.
going to let Councillor Flitter continue, and then you will have your chance when it comes around. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, it is in the purpose of the report. And the amendment to me, although I can actually agree with the sentiment, what I'm struggling with is that we've heard our officers who are saying that this would not fit in with government guidelines, and it wouldn't fit in for the purpose that we're here for tonight. Now, I don't rest. I have my ideals, but I also look for a balance. And there are other ways of doing this and achieving this. But what we've got on here tonight probably doesn't fit in with what this motion is about. And I shall listen to the debate and then make my voting choice later on. But I am concerned that we've got to do this the right way, in the right manner, to comply with government guidance and make it official and thoughtful for the people that are in this situation.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you very much, Chair. In principle, I would support this amendment. Councillor Purdy talks about a loss of revenue. There will be no loss of revenue. What we're talking about is additional revenue that individuals will have to pay if they house a refugee family, not a loss of revenue because they house a refugee family. So in this case, it turns out that families from Ukraine, families who are hosting Ukraine refugees will get payment through the council, the Derbyshire Dales will be compensated or be given an additional payment because they're taking those refugees. But they won't. The council won't be losing any money if the council doesn't charge more for a Syrian refugee family that is hosted locally, or a family from Myanmar. I've been to both of those countries, and they're marvelous countries, and it would be very disappointing if we couldn't provide the same sort of support for people from Myanmar and the people from Syria. So, and the same for Afghanistan, although I haven't been to Afghanistan. I tend to go to countries where there are revolutions, and I've missed that one, but there you go. So as far as I can see, there's no revenue implications arising from the amendment, because we wouldn't be losing revenue, we just would not be gaining revenue that would be a windfall revenue gain as a result of the personal choice of a resident in this council area. So we don't lose revenue. What we do is provide an equal service to people from a variety of different countries, all who face a lot of hardship and have spent years, months trying to get to this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Swindle, do you want to talk on the amendment? No. Councillor Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Karen and Rob for their explanation of this. And I agree with Councillor Flitter. I think we're making heavy weather of this, to be honest. I can absolutely see where Councillor Raw's coming from, in that, you know, we all think that refugees should be treated equally. And we could have a debate, couldn't we, about whether we think that has actually happened. But tonight's not the time for that. But to be honest, I don't think this amendment's been really thought through enough. And what my suggestion would be is that we vote on the what we've got in front of us, and then maybe Councillor Raw and Councillor Allison could have a discussion with Karen and whoever about bringing forward something else for us to debate. But I think tonight we should be just looking at what's in front of us. It's very clear what Karen said.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Allison. I've got you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got nothing more to add than what Councillor Hughes has really said, that there is no financial implications to this council. What the implications are that it looks very unequal treatment for people who are seeking refuge in our country because it's a safe place and they are fleeing war wherever it happens to be in the world, not just Ukraine. There are many, many countries where there are, terrible atrocities being committed against innocent people who are just getting caught up in this. But there seems to be some sort of favouritism that is being given to Ukrainian refugees. Why that is, I think we can all think maybe why that is really. I don't need to spell it out for people, but it seems to be. Sorry? Because they're not. Because the other.
Thank you.
refugees
Thank you.
I'll say it if you want me to say it. I think it is about people's religion, their background, their culture, that Ukrainians are seen as being more European and will fit into our country. And that is the kind of rhetoric that is coming out from this Conservative government all the time, that people from certain backgrounds are not welcome in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, did you want to put some?
I'd just like to explain that there are financial implications for the council. In normal circumstances, any council tax discount under this section 13A, the cost of that has to be wholly borne by this council. Now, you'll all know that when we collect council tax, the income from the council tax is shared out, with around 70% going to the county council. We retain about 14%, and the rest goes to the fire and the police and parish councils. Normally, council tax reliefs and discount and council tax support are also shared in those same proportions. But with these specific discounts, the cost goes wholly to Derbyshire Dales. Now, under these new arrangements that the government's introduced for Homes for Ukraine, they're allowing those specific discounts for the cost to be shared over all the preceptors. So the cost, if members were to change this and make it that to fit any host family for a refugee, because this is the host families we're talking about, not the refugees themselves. If they were to change it, you just need to be aware that this council will stand all of the cost of that discount, and it won't just stand 14% as it would for the Ukrainians. Now, given the numbers, that might not be significant, but you just need to be informed that that's the case.
Thank you for that, Karen. Councillor Gamble.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Karen. Yes, there is a financial implication. I understand that. But I do, again, say it was small, because basically what we're talking about is the non-dependent income taken into account in housing benefit and council tax benefit, aren't we? And obviously, yes, if you don't take off someone's benefit, that will be something that will be borne by the council. For that to be borne by the council, though, they would not just have to have a host family that had got any refugee. That refugee would have to be earning income, obviously, because it is only non-dependent income that's taken into account. So I'm thinking about, say, like the Afghan resettlement scheme. Probably a lot of those might be in the middle of asylum claims. They wouldn't be eligible to work anyway, so they won't be contributing to the income, particularly necessarily. But even if they are, I mean, we're talking very, very few families, and we're talking about really a small proportion of the benefit claim. It's really not going to break the bank of the council. I think to make just a small statement that we actually do see that this is an issue of equality. It's not something that's going to have huge financial implications.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Councillor Raw for bringing this point up. I think it's an important one. It's an important point of principle, a principle that we are a compassionate council, and we need not just to say that, we need to demonstrate it. And I think, as others have said, of course, the situation in Ukraine is critical at the moment, but we treat all refugees equally. And that's why I very want to urge everyone to support this amendment. On the couple of points that officers have made, I'd like officers perhaps to confirm that the amendment as stated would not have any impact on our eligibility to benefit from the government's Ukraine scheme, because we're not excluding Ukrainian refugees. We're simply using an all-encompassing term of refugees. On the potential financial cost, I'd say I'm not too clear on this. Clearly, refugees who are not from Ukraine will not, the host family will not be in receipt of the £350 monthly thank you. And therefore there is there's no potential cost to the council in having to compensate the households in receipt of that. So I'm not quite sure where the cost arises. As the report says, the one aspect of the scheme to assist host families is to protect their rights for discount, where they're in receipt of discount. All we are doing is protecting that discount. There is no cost to the council in protecting a discount. We're simply saying that it will continue to apply. So I have to say that I'm not sure that in reality there would be any financial cost to the council, but I would urge all members, and I think we all are caring and compassionate here, to support the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Karen, do you want to make any reply to that?
The protection of the discounts is something that the government have already enacted. That was just for background information for members, really. We're not asking you to vote on that tonight. Yes, there will be a financial cost to this this change to encompass all refugees rather than just those from Ukraine. But I don't believe it will be that significant. I think, given what my colleague Rob Coggins has said, I think also the reality is that most refugees from other countries are not being hosted by British families at this time. So I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference in terms of the cost to the council. So from that point of view, I can accept the change.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. For this item, for this recommendation and the amendment involved with it, to infer that this council is showing discrimination or inequality is actually disingenuous. We're looking here at a council tax situation and the people involved of the homeowners. Rob has already said that this council supports refugees in other aspects, in other areas. We have shown no discrimination against any refugees. They are all welcome in the Derbyshire Dales. It's just this individual situation that the homeowner who's paying the council tax is eligible for the discount. So simplify the wording. How about if we put, instead of Homes for Ukraine related increases, why do we not just put that discount will be available for any refugee who are home hosted by a family in the Dales? And we're not discriminating against any other refugees. We're just protecting the families that have taken the refugees in. So don't make it specific to Ukraine, but make it specific to home hosted.
Councillor Chapman, just listening to that, and what I've got written down at the side here is that's what they wish to take out, Ukraine related as regards any refugees. So
Chair,
that is what the amendment on this was about.
I agree, Chair, but the inference was that we are showing discrimination and inequality against other refugees who won't be part of that scheme.
I think we've gone round and debated on this a bit. I think I'm going to go back to Councillor Raw to sum up your amendment, and then we'll go to the vote on the amendment. Just a sec, sorry.
From a pragmatic point of view, I can see that there probably won't be enough members in the chamber to support my amendment. So what I would like to put forward is that we do a proper equalities impact assessment with costings, and then we can make a decision about this, because I do have concerns over the equalities in relation to this, and I know there will probably be some costs. So if we can come back with a summary report, inequalities impact assessment report, that would be helpful, and then I'll withdraw my amendment and we'll retable the paper.
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm this. So what I think the amendment now, and you'd have to get the approval of the seconder for withdrawal, is the amendment's withdrawn. However, it seems like a new amendment that a report is brought back with impact assessment and costings to amend the policy again for
I've just been speaking with colleagues, and we want to go ahead with the vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Chair.
Okay, then, so we're going to go ahead with the vote. So the vote is on the amendment, which I'll let Lee state out what it refers to.
So the amendment is amendment to recommendation 2, which now reads that approval is given for a new class of discount where a discount is provided to offset a refugee-related increase in council tax liability during 2022-23.
So with that, I'd like to see a vote. All in favour, please show.
Make that 12, Chair.
Against?
Make that 18, Chair. My math is correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. So we now move back to the original recommendations 1 and 2. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move these recommendations. I've listened carefully to what colleagues have said, and I've also listened to the quite, I can't describe the questioning and detailed question of Karen here being harried and by people. I just can't believe it. When I first started in the council, if people had got questions or debate about a paper, they would email it in and we would have dialogue before, not wait to a council meeting and to ask sort of strident questions. We've hosted Syrian refugees. I've been to a house with Rob. This council is inclusive and welcoming, and our officers are working really hard. And I think people just, you know, facing the questions, it's just absolutely appalling. Sorry.
Councillor Morley.
Yes, I'm going to second that, and I'd also like it minuted that I am concerned about the harrying of our finance officer, and I think harrying is the right word. So thank you for that, Chair, and I will second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buttle.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to harry you some more, Karen. How does the council tax, the bedroom tax, interact with this? Does it make it more complex if people have somebody staying with them? Do they still have to pay the council tax because this is a spare room, but it's got Ukrainians in it or what? I don't know how I was just wondering if you could help me with that.
The bedroom tax is part of housing benefit, I believe, not council tax support. The government have been able, or I understand they're in the process of changing the housing benefit regulations so that this type of income for the host families can be disregarded in the housing benefit calculation. The problem with the council tax support is each council has to set their own scheme before the start of the financial year, and we can't then change it in year. Now, why the government couldn't have changed the legislation to allow us to make an in-year change rather than jump through all these hoops, I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finesse.
Well, I'm very much in favour of this motion as it stands. I think, you know, to try and create a difference, well, there is a difference between Ukrainian refugees and Syrian, etc., in that the Ukrainian refugees have been bombed out of their houses by Putin. You know, the villages have been destroyed, their cities have been destroyed, their towns have been destroyed. They've nowhere to live. I said by Putin. So there's nowhere to live. They have to move somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Not across the floor.
Can you do this through the chair, please? Can we do this through the chair? Thank you.
Sorry,
so, you know, the idea that we can alter what is government policy, it's a government scheme, and if we meddle in that, it's at our peril. We must accept it as it is. You know, so I'm very happy to go along with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think this has got really messy and it's a shame. I am going to support the motion because it's helping refugees from Ukraine come to the UK and helping to make sure that people feel they can accept them. However, I do completely understand and support the principle of the suggested amendment, and I think any suggestion that Syrian refugees and people from other parts of the world haven't been bombed out of their homes is wrong, because people from Syrian refugees and other refugees from Afghanistan and so on have also been very much been bombed out of their homes, and to a large extent with the support of, even if not quite as directly, by Putin. So it is, in my opinion, a real shame that the government policy, the government legislation, does make such an obvious difference is specified between types of refugee, and that is a real shame. I feel we have to support the motion because it's helping a group of refugees, and I wouldn't want to not support something that helps any group of refugees. But I think it is a shame. I actually thought Councillor Chapman's suggestion was a good one, that could have amended the wording slightly so that the word Ukrainian was taken out, and it was very obvious that this council sees all refugees who are fleeing war and other awful situations and circumstances the same way. It's a government legislation that's put us in a difficult position. We have to support this to help the Ukrainian refugees, but I would have liked a bit of a change of wording to try and make sure that it was very clear that this council believes we ought to be helping all refugees in the same way. And it's a shame that we've not come up with a way of doing that.
Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all need to take a big, deep breath. I supported the amendment. I thought it was a sensible amendment, and I support anybody coming to this country who is fleeing persecution or war, conflict, or whatever. And, you know, for that reason, I supported it. I'm still going to support the motion that's before us now. I'm going to because Karen's assured us that that was the amendment Karen assured us on. The reason I'm going to support this one is I want to do something to support anybody who is coming here. Even if it doesn't mean we can help everybody, I want to do something that will help somebody. I'm not supporting them because of their ethnicity, their religion, because they are pro-European. I can't imagine that every Ukrainian that comes to this country will be of the same religion, the same ethnicity, and all be pro-European. You find diversity in almost every community and country now. The difference, I feel that why this motion's come about in the way that it has, is this scheme has been primarily focused on asking people to open up their homes to take people in. This council, as Councillor Hobson has said, and whilst I was on this council, has discussed and debated taking in Syrian refugees, Afghan refugees, refugees of all backgrounds, all religions, and from all parts of the world. The difference was we weren't asking people to take them in, we were giving them homes. So there is a distinct difference with why we're talking about the council tax issue and how it will affect our residents with existing support. And that is why I'm supporting it. I wish the amendment had gone through, and it's great. But I do have to say that I've loved being a councillor for the 12 years that I've been a councillor, but I'm beginning to despair coming to these meetings. Meetings past, if I may, Chair, just divulge, we all had calm, sensible debates where we won or lost, and we carried on, and that's democracy. That's how council chambers work. But we need to put our arguments across in a calm and effective way to win a debate, because when they are put forward with shouting and talking in the background when I can't hear what everybody else is saying, it puts me off supporting it. But it was a damn good amendment, so I did. But please, let's just have a little bit more grown-up debate. This is a town hall council chamber. It's not the Houses of Commons. Thank you.
Thank you for that point, Councillor Swindle. Councillor Wayne.
Yes, thank you. I think anything that is put before us, on these recommendations that are going to benefit the Ukrainian people coming to our country and enabling people, and that's the important thing. We're helping to enable people to take them into our homes, and I do feel that we should be supporting this. Councillor Raw's amendment, yes, it was a good amendment, but I just feel that we've got to vote, or I'm going to vote in favour of the recommendations. I'd just like to say that, yet again, I think the debate has been, sometimes it's a passionate, it's a passionate subject. It's an emotive subject. And at the end of the day, people's emotions will manifest themselves in the debate. And I don't consider that one of our officers are resolute people. We've said that before. And we shouldn't be criticised for asking questions. People should be able to ask questions in a public arena. That's what I personally believe. And I don't think harried is the right word. Maybe challenge, but at the end of the day, I do think Karen is a resolute soul. She's an excellent local government officer who's highly accomplished with her arena. And I do think that we should listen to her. But at the end of the day, that doesn't prevent us from asking questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. Oh dear. Well, thank you, Councillor Swindle, for saying those few words about the meetings, because I feel exactly the same. Over many years, we've sat here in debate and we've gone out as friends. And, that's becoming more and more impossible as the time goes on. Councillor Chapman used the word ingenuous. I was quite hurt, and I have to temper my words tonight on this, because I don't think that word was enough. I was very hurt. Every human being, every person on this planet is a human being and should be treated with respect, in my view, and that's my belief. I don't bear grudge with anybody, have any preference, but this tonight was purely specific for the people from Ukraine. I don't like labels. Labels cause discrimination from those that aren't mentioned in any subject, not just this one. And I have to remind people that voting against this motion tonight is actually discriminating those that are taking families in from the Ukraine. I believe that we should support this motion tonight and be pleased to support it. And if we can come back and help others as we get direction to help others, then we would take the same sort of action. We're not a council that shies away from this. It is a difficult situation, and I'm fully aware of the risks, and I hope that everybody will support it with respect.
Thank you, Councillor Flitter. I'm just going to bring in Lee, because you made a point on legal situation and licensing earlier.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond because the way the debate went, no one came back to you on your question about the appeal issue that you raised earlier. The reason why I've recommended that this is included in the policy is that generally when someone applies for the discretionary grant, they provide a reasonable amount of information, and Karen assesses that on the information they've got. And usually once a reason goes back, we end up with more information, more arguments about why. But their only route of appeal is a statutory route of appeal to the Land Property Tribunal. Therefore, the recommendation is to give residents a chance to ask us to, in effect, consider additional evidence so that we're not spending time and effort dealing with an appeal through the courts process rather than having a second look. And then if it then goes to, we uphold the decision, then it can properly go through the courts with all the information being seen and provided.
I did understand that, but it is what I said is it is slow, it is demanding, and I'd like to make things a lot easier for the people that to put their case. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support the motion too. I mean, when I read it originally before the meeting, I thought this was a good motion. It was a good report, a good motion, something that could be supported. Turning to Councillor Raw's amendment and the comments that have been made about hectoring, I welcome Councillor Raw's amendment.
Sorry, point. Are we discussing the amendment or the actual motion in front of us? I think you're going over all.
I'm not going to discuss the amendment. No. I'm disappointed by the comments that were made about the amendment and about the questioning of Karen. Transparency is important in a council. The points that Councillor Raw made, Councillor Allison made, I hadn't thought of before this meeting. It was important, I think, for all of us to think about the equalities issues associated with this motion, and they brought them up. The amendment failed, but we are now better informed about the motion and how it fits into the to the work in which we do and our values. So thank you, Councillor Raw. Thank you, Councillor Allison, for coming up with that amendment and bringing it forward in the council chamber. And thank you for those people who have questioned Karen in the council chamber, because that aided transparency. If we have questions beforehand, there's no transparency. There's a one-to-one relationship between the questioner and the responding officer. That is not transparent. So please, I ask people to ask the questions in the meetings and to enter into debate. Regarding the equality between Ukrainian refugees and refugees from other countries, this is a personal comment, Councillor Furness. My agent in Syria came from Aleppo. His family came from Aleppo. He had his family was in Damascus, and fortunately he could get out to the UK before without any harm coming to him. He had business interests in the UK. He could come and live in England in the UK without any trouble.
Chair, is this relevant?
But there are lots of families in Aleppo and in other countries that were bombed by Putin and using Russian armaments. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Purdy, were you asking for?
I'd like to move to the vote, Chair.
Chair, if it may assist that a motion can be put at any time that the vote be put. That needs to be proposed and seconded. You have a proposer, you need a seconder. I know that there's people waiting, but the procedure rules say that a member can move a motion at any time to have the vote put on any item.
I think at the end of the day, we have discussed this for quite a long time in both the amendment and the actual recommendation that's before us now. Does that find a seconder to put Councillor Atkins? So then I am not taking any more point of orders. I have taken that we go to this. We have spent so much time on it. I'd like to go to the vote. That is not part of this proposal. That is something that you need to talk to with the legal and the democratic services as regards issues that go on which are personal to each other within the council, not on the council floor discussing council matters. Thank you. So with that, it's been proposed that we put the motion of the recommendations that were before you, items number 1 and 2. All those in favour, please show.
Chair, on a point of order, we have not yet voted on whether we're going to put it to the vote.
Chair, I was assuming that was the vote to put it to the vote. That's my understanding. But if you wish to clarify, Chair, then we're putting the motion tabled is a motion to put the recommendations to a vote.
We're going round the houses, and I think we're trying to be very clever here. But OK, we'll agree to agree, or disagree if you like, that the proposal of taking the motion and going to the vote, can we see a show of hands to actually do that first? All in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. I thought so. So we will go back now to the recommendations. Sorry, beg me pardon. It's carried for the numbers, okay? So now we will now go back to the proposal. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Now, if I find that unanimous, and I'm afraid it seems that we've took so long in getting to that situation, and I find it very disappointing. But with that, I'm going to take 10 minutes break for you all to go and come and do whatever needs to be done.
Every meeting I say this is my last one. What do you want to say to me?
Okay then, thank you everybody. Now I'm going to change the item round due to the fact that we've got public members here. And so we're going to discuss item 13, the Gypsy and Traveller site update, as the next item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure members have gone through the report, but I'd just like to emphasise 6 key points briefly. The outcome of the ground investigations, which show whilst the ground is not overly contaminated, there are complications in placing buildings on the site. Ecology issues relating to the outlying badger set, which have both compromised the ground investigations and significantly restrict the developable area of the site. And whilst badgers are present in the area, they were not present on the site earlier in 2021. Government funding for traveller sites is available, but the timescales placed on submitting and delivery of works is very challenging. Remediation costs are significant for this site, particularly for only a handful of pitches. The badger set will always likely remain on the site, and so there will always be a high level of risk in relation to our understanding of the whole of the site. We can't physically do the ground investigations without disturbing the badger. In conclusion, the combined ecology and grounding issues uncovered through the investigations by RSK, together with the difficulty of accessing services, mean that the site cannot feasibly be developed. In terms of our next steps, it's suggested there will be a significant need to accommodate the traveller family associated with the Dales, and so officers will continue to work to identify further sites. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you for letting me speak first, Chair. Because it's important, I want to lay down another recommendation. So I'd just like to go through some thoughts, please. When Nabble Lane Tansley was voted in at full council, not unanimously, as we know, as a potential for a permanent traveller site, it appeared at that time.
Yes, we will come back to questions. I've led to this.
I'm coming to a recommendation, Councillor. Bear with me, please. That Nabble Lane would be the permanent traveller site. We knew this was not the case according to the rules and procedures laid down in law to develop such a site. It was in fact quite simply the first stage in the necessary process of examination of the land, and if that passed the test, to be subject to a planning application. The external consultant report shows that there are too many impracticable issues to resolve and a too high cost for this authority to commit to Nabble Lane Tansley. That is why the delivery of the report to me by Rob Coggins, I instructed that we would have to make the recommendations you see before you now. My disappointment is for the traveller families concerned, who were looking forward to having possession of their own small piece of land upon which they could call home, and to put an end to the continual threat of being moved on from pillar to post. Gypsy travellers are the most racially abused section of our society. We all have our own homes, and how would we feel if we were constantly evicted and moved from pillar to post? This situation, though, leaves the authority in a position where we are still unable to provide a permanent travel site in Derbyshire Dales. And this, as you know, has been going on for many years. And it fails thereby to fulfil our obligations under the local plan. We are back to square one, and it is not a position to be proud of. And it makes me especially angry to think that we had the site at Water Lane, Ashbourne, taken away from us by the new administration at County Hall in 2017, after it had been approved by our planning committee. Instead of nasty objections to wherever we try to place the travellers, subject to the duty of care this authority has to them, members need to take ownership of this issue and to put some positive thought and sensible ideas forward as to how best to resolve this issue. I've asked the Chief Executive to our officers to seek alternative possible sites as a matter of some urgency. It is, though, completely unfair to expect our officers alone to carry out such a task, and that task should not rest on their shoulders alone. We all have a collective responsibility. Alongside this issue, we're faced with a recent announcement from government for grant fund monies being available, which can be applied for in order to provide a permanent traveller site, but with a very short timescale in which to achieve that aim. Again, I've asked for some urgency to try and resolve that issue for a permanent traveller site, and the monies, if approved by government, would have to be spent by March 2023. On Wednesday, 6th of April, Tim Braun and myself were interviewed at the Town Hall by the Advisory Committee on the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, and which of course included our traveller families and the extra travellers that arrive from time to time. The delegation consisted of representatives from Portugal, Estonia and the Czech Republic, supported by a two-person secretariat, one British, one French. Present also at that meeting was the Derbyshire County Council Gypsy Liaison Officer, Dr. Siobhan Spencer. Tim and I advised on the problems the authority faces in respect of the two homeless families and the occasional travellers that illegally camp on our land, and the hostilities and nastiness experienced from local communities wherever the travellers camp or where there is any proposal to put them, and the lack of joined-up commitment by all members of this authority, and the fact that travellers are legally protected from discrimination. Travellers have been identified as being amongst the most disadvantaged ethnic minority groups in British society, as declared by the Equality and Human Rights Commission 2008. If anybody is interested in any reading, you can borrow these. Members, in addition to the recommendation before you, I now submit this recommendation, that the Council initiates a proactive programme of publicity to encourage landowners to submit potential traveller sites for consideration, with potential financial assistance being provided by the District Council to acquire and develop a permanent site for travellers in Derbyshire Dales. Thank you for bearing with me, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Councillor Purdy, can I just, because there's no recommendations on the table as yet, are you moving all 4 recommendations plus that additional recommendation as the proposal?
Chair, I'm just clarifying, if we're not going ahead with the site, is there any need to do the budget recommendation, Rob?
Chair, I think in terms of the local interest and the low cost of undertaking the work, I think it would be helpful to demonstrate our credentials in safeguarding the badger by knowing more about it and then sharing that information with the local badger group.
Thank you for that, Rob. I'm happy with that. So yes, I'll move the 4 recommendations and the additional one, Chair.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Dunn. Okay. Now we are going into questions. Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Burford, Mr. Burford.
Yes, I'm at a loss to understand what we're talking about now, because we've completely.
Why are you lost? Because obviously there's all the recommendations there.
We've got different recommendations. We haven't seen it in writing. We never get any information from the controlling group until they just produce it.
It's on your report.
On what report?
On the agenda.
Is it? Oh.
Yeah, all I've done is added the additional one.
I couldn't tell which you were talking about that was already tabled and which was new. But anyway, I mean, all this, what you've just proposed, Councillor Purdy, or through the chair, could have been proposed 9 months ago, rather than go through this pointless debate for the last 9 months about a site which was totally unsuitable to start with. But anyway, I'd like to know from, and I sympathise with Rob Coggins, because he obviously drew the short straw in terms of, and had the unenviable task of organising and procuring a variety of site investigations at Nampole Lane. But I'd like to know, not now, obviously you won't know now what the figure is, but I'd like to know how much has been spent on this pointless exercise in the past 9 months or more, including officer time. I'd like to see that figure sooner rather than later. And the second question is, why has it taken so long to get RSK's full report from the end of October, when they commenced their investigations? And we didn't get anything until the end of March, which is why this debate has been postponed until now. So that's the second question, thank you. And I want to speak in the debate as well.
Councillor Hughes, question?
I do now have a question. Yes, I was going to just say to speak in debate, but I do have a question.
Thank you.
Come through you, Chair. Councillor Purdy, is your recommendation, your additional recommendation, under item number 13 on the agenda? That reads, oh gosh, it reads, I've lost the page now.
Page 60 of the agenda, if it helps, Councillor.
Say again?
60.
No, on the item on page 60, because the item on page 13 just says to update the council on the, there's no motion there. So under item 13, on page 60, there are 4 recommendations, But where is that? You said it was in writing. Oh, you didn't say it was in writing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said originally. Certainly. Yeah.
So the clarification is on everybody's part here that Councillor Purdy is wishing to add another recommendation. He's made that point now before we ask the questions so that you've all got that in the back of your mind and you know what his points is on that recommendation.
Is it possible to see it in writing? It's quite a long one. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor. No, Councillor Flitter. Sorry, Councillor Burford. What was that? Sorry. From Rob. Rob, would you like to come back on that one, please? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Paragraph 1.2 sets out the report sets out the timeline for the works undertaken. So they were on site we went into tender as per our contract standing orders. The works took place in December and the report was delayed from January because of COVID in the laboratory that was undertaking the analysis of the samples. The sampling programme still isn't complete, as I've mentioned in the report, so there is a few more air samples to take place yet.
I'll come back to yourself in a minute. Yes, I'm still on questions. Don't worry, I'm still on questions. Okay, Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record, I understood what the proposed motion added was, but I do think that it would have shown a little respect for other members to have had it on a paper as these are delivered around for members speaking from the public, and then we would have all known about it. However, I did understand what had been said. The question that, the only thing on this that I'm not going to go through everything again, I will have something to say in a minute, but it is 3.3 on page 63, and we're talking about land developer, development agent, and I can't understand what reasoning that has to be there. Is there any other motive for that land?
Through you, Chair, I put that in there to show that in terms of our ability to design and specify buildings and structures, we need a development agent to do that on our behalf. That doesn't relate to Nabhall Lane, that relates to our work particularly to try and provide a site somewhere. So if Nabhall Lane was going to proceed, NCHA as our development agent could design a scheme for us, but in the event that doesn't happen, they could design a scheme somewhere else. The point is we haven't got that expertise in-house. We need to use an external agent to do that for us.
So it's not a back door for housing?
Oh, well, no, the same constraints would apply
okay.
On the site as it would for any form of dwelling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. Just to state straight off that I am happy with the fifth recommendation. And incidentally, I welcome your comment, your response to the questioner this evening about the possible future use of this land as some sort of community conservation area. My question relates to recommendation 3, which I am uneasy about. I can see that it relates to paragraph 6.2, but my question is, what is the point of this given the undoubted acknowledgement that there is a large badger set already present on this land. What further use would a camera trap supply us with when we know the answer there? This seems to me just rather superfluous, and I would rather that recommendation 3 is not present.
Rob, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. I think which is an outlying set. That's the first. It's not a major set. It's an outlying set, probably occupied by one badger. That's the view of our ecologist. But there's an opportunity. I think the council's taken the decision in the past to protect badgers on its own land, and this would be a way of reinforcing that message that we're keen to support and recognise.
Accept what you're saying, except it just seems to me supplementary evidence that's unnecessary. We are taking a decision tonight primarily for recommendation 2, and if the pursuit of this site as a location is dismissed, then there is no future purpose served by doing further work on it.
Well, if I could add a bit more, Chair. Clearly there's been a lot of interest from the local community in terms of the welfare of the badger on the site, and being able to, at relatively low cost, reaffirm that knowledge and share that so that the local badger group can be more informed would be I'd say a nice thing to do, perhaps.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Burford, thank you.
Yeah, I have got a question, but I would like to speak later. It's just I'm not clear about recommendation 2. Am I right in thinking, through the chair, Councillor Purdy, that you're taking out consider ceasing the pursuit and making it ceasing the pursuit?
I think that's for members to decide, but my view, Councillor Barefoot, is that it's impracticable to work this site and too costly.
So, if I may just come back, you can't leave it then as consider, if you put your recommendation, you can't leave it as consider ceasing, can you?
That's for consideration tonight. If you want to say cease it, then I'm happy to say cease it. Not for me to say.
I'm happy to say it now.
I'll second that.
That we remove consider ceasing, we put terminate. Or cease the pursuit of. So we remove that word consider. That members cease the pursuit. Make it very clear what we're voting on.
Councillor Purdy, I'm going to come back to yourself and just see whether within your wording that you want to put that in now. Obviously, the other members will get that chance to have that vote at the time of voting if they wish that.
Chair, the wording's there for the council to consider. I'm quite happy with what I recognise as an amendment, which I'm happy to support, that if council agree, you want to cease pursuing Nabble Lane, then we cease. I think we should. I've said that to Rob Coggins based on his report to me that it's impracticable and it's too costly for this authority to pursue. But that's not a decision I can make. That's why we put consider, for the authority to consider. So if you're happy to put that in, I'm happy to support it.
Chair, if I may assist and clarify the matter. So you've got a proposed motion on the table, the recommendations. At the moment, that's not been voted on and approved. So therefore, the mover of that recommendation can, with the approval of the seconder, amend that up to the point of a formal vote taken. If they don't, then you have a tabled amendment which has to be voted on.
The quickest way, Chair, is agree to take consider out and just put cease the pursuit.
I think at the end of the day, and this is how I see it, and obviously I'm chair, and what you're all looking to see. I think we've all read the report, and I think forget all the other recommendations. I think recommendation does need changing, and say that we're all in agreement that the money has been spent. We've found out that it isn't viable, and the proposal should be that we now cease trying to take Naball Lane as a traveller's site. And I think that should be the proposal that is there. And I will take a second upon that. I'd like to lead that one. And we'll vote on that. And then I think everything else can be put to bed. But so, would anybody like to second that? Councillor Burford, would you like to speak on that? On what I've just stated? And just make that the one recommendation for this whole item. Yeah, okay. You can put a question. That is a bit in everything else. Just having a vote as the motion to clear this item up, rather than all the other recommendations that are there, to state we understand there is the update. We've got all the information in front of us, and we feel that it is non-viable to continue working and pursuing any more chance of Naball Lane being the traveller's site. That is my proposal there as a one-off recommendation for the traveller's site item.
Sorry, I'm presuming Rob did see the need for recommendation 4 because it has financial implications and moves money around the budgets. So do I assume that's needed? Yeah, so I don't think we should move straight to something that is just that recommendation 2, otherwise we've not sorted the money out.
Through you, Chair, can I just clarify, because I have to admit I'm starting to lose. So at the moment, initially we have 5 recommendations moved by Councillor Purdy. I apologise, it was seconded by Councillor Donnelly. That has been amended to remove the word ceasing out of that. So are we voting on that, Chair, or are you proposing? Sorry, consider, I apologise. Are you asking everyone to vote on that because that's the motion, or are you proposing an amendment, Chair?
Okay. Are we taking in the change on item 2 on the recommendation?
Chair, the proposer has already.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've done that.
Thank you, Chair. That's already
Okay.
done. So that's already been removed, and Councillor Donnelly approves. Yes. So that is now the motion on the table. So it's recommendation 1, recommendation 2, that the word consider is removed, recommendation 3, recommendation 4, and recommendation 5, which was proposed at Councillor Purdy's end of Councillor Purdy's statement.
Can't leave it at ceasing because it doesn't make sense.
That's why I have. Okay, thank you. I think the top and bottom of it is the added thing is Councillor Purdy put in the fact that we've all got to work together, knowing that, you know, we all think that Naball Lane is not going to be viable, and he wants to remove the fact of consider looking at this. So that's been taken out in recommendation 2. So it's what I said in the first place, that we're not going to continue spending any more money on a site that we know isn't feasible. But I will carry on taking questions, and then we will go into debate and vote. Thank you. Councillor Raw.
Sorry, we were just having a discussion about the same thing. Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Really appreciate what you've said about travellers communities and what you've shared tonight and the sensible and pragmatic decision that you're putting forward. Just in terms of point 5 and being proactive, which again I really welcome, I wondered if we could make an inclusion that would be proactive with the traveller community, because I think it's key. I've always thought it's key that we talk to the community about where they'll accept to go, and it might give us a direction of travel in terms of not wasting a lot of officer time going and looking at sites where we know the traveller community won't go. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to ask Tim to come in on this, the officer, because he will be able to explain about this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Rob and I sort of share roles in relation to this subject, in that I deal a lot with travellers as they arrive in the district and live in the district, and Rob obviously deals with housing sites, which a permanent traveller site would be. We are already engaged with the Derbyshire Gypsy Liaison Group. They're aware of the report before you tonight. You've met Dr. Siobhan Spencer before, who's come to these meetings. She's unable to be here tonight because she's at a meeting in Coventry. I've been in communication with her throughout, including today, and she has proposed a way forward in terms of looking for land, which does involve the Derbyshire Gypsy Liaison Group as a key stakeholder. So we would expect to do that, Councillor Roll.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gamble, question.
Yeah, it is a question, and yeah, again, yeah, just yes, thank you for the sensible and pragmatic approach we're taking now. But it was just the other element of when we took the decision to, when the council took the decision to go with the Napole site only, the other thing it did was rule out any temporary stopping places for the travellers. And I'm wondering, can I just ask the question? Post Tim really. Are you going to be bringing back to council anything to do with temporary stopping places? Because obviously now we haven't even got a site we're working on. That is something that I presume that we are going to need to look at.
Tim, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. There was a report about temporary stopping places that came after the one that was about Napole Lane, but nevertheless, you're right, Councillor Gamble, those decisions were made. As far as the authority of any officer to move travellers from one site to another, or the travellers to whom we owe a homelessness duty from one site to another, that officers currently don't have that authority. We have one family at the moment who are on a site in Matlock, which members are all aware of. The other family is at a site just outside our district, and we are engaged with them still through Siobhan Spencer, actually. It may very well be that they will want to come back into the district in the not too distant future, and we will have to deal with that. I'm not at this moment quite sure how I will be able to do that.
No, sorry, it was, were you thinking of bringing back the proposed stopping places that were sort of discounted at that decision? Because obviously I think, or you go, you know, proper, have I got the terminology wrong? You know, where we had proper designated places that they could go, which then disappeared when that recommendation went through. Are they coming back?
Don't worry, I know what you mean, Councillor Gamble. It's negotiated stopping places, but yeah, the phraseology doesn't matter. If asked to bring that back, then I will do so. As I say, at the moment, if travellers arrive, if any of the homeless travellers arrive on a site that we own in the district, officers have no power to move them on from that site. That's the honest situation. If I'm requested to bring that back, then I certainly will.
I'd like you to bring that back.
Tonight's not the time to ask that, I don't believe. It's not on the meeting. Okay, what have we got? Councillor Flitter, did you wish a question?
Not a question as such, but I have now, because I'm
Okay.
getting more confused by the minute. As I understood it, just a point of clarification, Madam Chair. As I understood it, Councillor Purdy put a motion down with an extra point on number 5. And then yourself were putting another motion. Did that not get seconded?
My motion, it was as such, but it wasn't put to the fore. It was just trying to make the point of item 2, which Councillor Burford was
Right,
doing.
I think that clears it up.
So we are actually on the main, what was first stated with the recommendation 5 being passed round, and upon what we were all saying about is it worth carrying on with the date on what's happening and spending money, I just said that, you know, item 2, and obviously with Councillor Burford saying that, you know, can't we change the wording? That's been added to change the wording within that recommendation.
Right, thank you. Because
Okay.
my other question was, that I forgot before, was have we got an intent of what is going to happen on the site? And if for some reason it's not a valuable site for this council to consider, have we considered at all transferring that ownership of this small piece of land to the parish council so they can operate it locally?
Thanks, Chair. I probably ought to answer that. The Parish Council have previously expressed an interest in a community asset transfer, and we've heard a proposal put by a member of the public tonight as well. In the end, it will be for the Council or for the Governance and Resources Committee to consider the future use of this land, and I guess what we ought to do is seek proposals for it and let you judge those.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Salt, did you have a question? Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Can I suggest that if the Nab Hall Lane site is to be returned to a wildlife habitat, that we approach Derbyshire Wildlife Trust for financial and practical assistance to achieve that? Matt.
Yeah, I think that's one for another night at the moment. Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to make any questions? Sorry, Councillor Wayne, I've crossed you out once.
Story of my life, but never mind. Well, thankfully, we're getting somewhere with this, I think, at the present time. It may not seem like it currently, but we will be. What I'd like to ask, basically, is I really like Mr. Johnson's suggestion earlier on, and I would like, is there no way that we could, in the time of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, because of the, you know, some people in Tansley have suffered a lot of duress in relation to this and a lot of concern. Yeah. Can we as an organisation not do something to, not necessarily bequest it, but enable it to be something that's a Platinum Jubilee sort of field or something like that, or an area of, you know, natural beauty? And secondly, sorry, Councillor Purdy, did you say something? Sorry. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Rather ignorant. The second thing is the badgers. I do think that I know that the Derbyshire Badger Trust have been involved. Could we, rather than us having to fund this, could they not do something in relation to taking the matter forward? Because I know they are keen to plot these badgers and monitor them. And the final thing is what Councillor Raw alluded to, is we really need to work with the travellers. I've been to many meetings here and they've identified a location where they want to be. And I think that is very, very important to get a harmonious result. Thank you.
Rob, would you like, or Tim, would you like to come back on any of those little points that Councillor Wayne made?
It's a matter for members as to what we do with the land ultimately, but you know, there's a decision tonight that we're not going to progress with the course of action that Council was previously proceeding with. And there might be any number of options that would come forward for this piece of land, and I would have imagined that members would want to consider those in the round. Perhaps what we could do is suggest that proposals are put forward by members and others for this piece of land. In relation to involvement of the traveller community, I feel I ought to say that the traveller community have been involved in these discussions all the way through and were completely happy with going to this site if it proved practicable.
Thank you for that. Right, I'm going to move back to Councillor Purdy to go over what you have proposed, and we will go into debate with the seconder and go from there.
Yeah, well, first of all, apologies for not being able to type the recommendation 5. I've been with my wife in the hospital today and I've had to rush back to this meeting. So Recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 4, but in relation to 2, take out the word consider and make it clear that we're ceasing the pursuit of Naball Lane. Recommendation 5, I hope that you've all seen it now. I've passed it to Councillor Hughes and hopefully it's spread round. So those I move 1 to 5, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly, you was the seconder within that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm quite happy to go along with Councillor Purdy's proposition. I think it's an excellent way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to make comments? Councillor Flitter?
Thank you, Chair. Well, we come back. I do have to be a little critical here. It's not my usual stance, but I feel very strongly that over the last months and years, the public and residents of Tansley have suffered. We told you about the badger set. We told you about the contamination. We told you about the lack of services. And we told you about the local opposition. And we also contested ownership of this property in the first place on how it came about. And I dealt with that, what was termed a squatter on that land, that he claimed that he'd been there over 12 years, and he had. But after saying all that, I do have to say that the things that Councillor Purdy did say in his opening statement on this tonight, I found a little strange, because the tone of what he was saying seemed to indicate blame in some way. And I don't think he has to look too far to apportion that blame. It certainly isn't from this side, and we shall be making that quite clear. As I said, the residents of Tansley have been put through the mill on this one, and I hate to say it was another Starcombs to me. And we talk about integrity of this council, trust in this council, and belief in this council that we are working for the public. And in this area of Tansley, it does not seem like the controlling party of this council have been doing that. So to come along with this now, it's a told you so. And I hope that we can still go forward, because if you're going to try and blame anybody, you don't want to look too far away. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mr Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I must say I agree with 100% with what Councillor Purdy said about the needs of the traveller community and the persecution they face up and down the country, and the priority in item 5 or recommendation 5 to initiate a programme of publicity to encourage landowners to come forward with a suitable site for investigation. But I've got to say, as Councillor Flitter just said, that Lib Dem members of both wards in Matlock have been vindicated really from last July, when we pointed out then, and we've constantly pointed out since, the complete unsuitability of the Naball Lane site and its location for development as both a temporary, and that was a contradiction, temporary and permanent site at the same time. That was a complete impossibility. And so we've pointed out that the obviously the discovery of the badger set, and that upset things as well, and really stymied the project right from the word go, because it eliminated about 25% at least of the site. And the cost, of course, and I think as I've got quite a lot of experience in that sort of development, I could see that the cost was going to be probably £500,000 to £1 million altogether by the time we finished supplying all the services and so on that were required. And it still wouldn't be a suitable site, in our opinion, because of the altitude of the site, the poor weather in the winter, the narrowness of the lane, access to it. In fact, as we heard, that during the site investigations, a larger machine that was required to excavate deep enough to go below the tipped, possible contaminated tip material, couldn't actually access the site along the lane or through the narrow gateway. So I think the only useful action that's come or result from the last 9 months has been the demolition and removal of sheds and structures and some surface tip materials from the site. So at least it's now a relatively clean site, and the badgers hopefully will get their comeuppance, or not their comeuppance, we'll get our comeuppance, and the badgers will get their site, and they can probably develop it over the years if it becomes a wildlife sanctuary, which is what I would like to see. I think it's got to be a biodiverse site for wildlife habitats, not for any recreation or any construction in the future. No, as Councillor Buckler would say, it needs to be rewilded basically, and that will be a perfect solution. As Mr. Johnson said earlier, you know, all the perimeter trees should be retained, and along with the badger set. I think it's probably, you could argue, in fact, that badgers and travellers are probably mutually exclusive anyway. I don't think they would have survived very long, even if we had isolated them and brought and developed the site, and it wouldn't have provided a number of the pictures that were required either. So it was a total nonsense right from the word go. I agree that search for site must continue, as item 5 of recommendations states. And is it too late to benefit from the government's £10 million fund? I think the deadline is the 13th of June, probably that's the case. I don't know about the Woodyard scheme at Holmesford, whether that's going to be it's a planning application now, whether it's going to be refused again, I don't know. It may go to appeal yet again. And of course, we don't know with the unpredictability of the government's planning inspectorate whether it will be allowed again at that stage. But I think it's going to be too late for applying for this government grant. Of course, the other site, as Councillor Purdy rightly pointed out, was stymied by the County Council once Councillor Spencer and co took over the County Council and said it was over their dead bodies that they would allow development of that site, which was, as Councillor Purdy rightly pointed out, granted planning consent many years ago. So I think the other recommendations, I think probably I agree with Councillor Ratcliffe actually, that recommendation 3 is probably not necessary. I'll support it, but it is £1,000 more expense that isn't probably necessary really. I think if you just exclude the public from it, lock the gate, then it will obviously rewild and it'd be quite satisfactory for badgers. I don't think we need to probably do any further investigation, but if that's what members feel, then £1,000 is possibly well spent on that. So I think that's all I need to say really. I think I agree with what Councillor Frith says, by the way, about Tansey Parish Council. I think we have to thank them for their vigilance over the past 9 months, because they've spent money and had to pay for legal advice to support their case against the development, which has been I think an awful lot of time wasting on their part as well. So I think that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to repeat what other people have said so far. I welcome the report. I think it's an excellent report. It's detailed, it's thorough, it's everything a council report should be, and it will allow us to make a good decision as a result. I hope it will close this particular episode. The previous debate, I think there are some lessons that we can learn. The first is that officers must thoroughly research options before bringing them to council.
Do you think this is making any point in the judgment of how you would vote or how all the members would vote in discussing what has been and what's gone?
I think so, yes.
But
I'm not going to take very long doing it. Secondly, officers need to consult with local people before putting forward the proposals, because local people have local knowledge, and Tansey Parish Council had local knowledge. They should have certainly been consulted. Members should be consulted, because local members are supposed to be consulted about things that are going to happen in their wards. This did not happen. Thirdly, councillors need to reject reports that do not provide sufficient information for them to make decisions. And the previous report had nothing to say about the traveller guidelines for travellers' sites. Indeed, I asked for the background information that was used to prepare the report, and there's nothing in the background information that wasn't actually in the report itself, which was scant in its ability, in the information that it provided to councillors to choose between the sites proposed. So we should, as councillors, have rejected that. I'd like to pay tribute to Tansley Parish Council and residents of Tansley in drawing attention of council officers to issues associated with the Nabhole Lane site. Their leadership role was exemplary. Not only did they point out that there were fundamental problems, but they also expressed their concern that it was inappropriate as a traveller's site. So not about the technical issues of the site, it was just not appropriate location and didn't fulfill the needs for travellers and didn't meet the guidelines for travellers. And in particular for the family that it was intended to host. Thirdly, I'd like to point out that the people who have lost out as a result of this, as Councillor Purdy remarked, are the families who continue to be housed on a temporary site. But I would say that that temporary site is more comfortable than the proposed permanent site that Nabhole Lane would have been. As councillors, we should be ashamed of our inability to find a suitable site for travellers in Derbyshire Dales, and indeed ashamed that a sensible approach to the provision of temporary sites proposed by Tim Braund was rejected by the leading group. I, for one, would welcome the rejected recommendations being brought to council once again in lieu of any permanent site being found in the short term. So thank you very much for listening, bearing with me and listening to me and the comments I'd like to make.
Okay. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I think the bringing of this report this evening does show that this council does have integrity to bring this for council to debate. What I am sorry about is that it's taken so long for the report to come through, causing anguish to the travellers and also the parish council. So I do hope we can move on to looking for a permanent site and temporary sites. And I know that Councillor Purdy and myself, we had, and the officers had a lot of debate with Dr. Spencer, but we must have debate with our residents and our communities. You know, we've got to have a good relationship. This must happen.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Burford.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as other members on this side of the debate, if you like, on this side of the House, we can't let this go without saying something. I do welcome this report. I welcome it as an honest appraisal of the site, and I thank Rob and anybody else who was involved for their work. But certainly we were not surprised by the findings. I am reminded there is a song, Road to Nowhere, by Talking Heads, the definition of which, I looked it up on Google, is of a plan, project or course of action that appears to have or offer no meaningful or useful conclusion. That's exactly how I see this. So here we are, many months down the line, and we've not made any progress to find a permanent site for this vulnerable family for whom we have a statutory duty. Because at the end of the day, I think we all agree that we've got a family here who have not got a permanent site. And I do appreciate what Councillor Purdy said about the response from the county council when they took control. That was really unfortunate is not really the word for it. So I hope we'll learn lessons from all this. I hope we learn the lesson that local members need to be listened to. That the local parish council of Tansley and the people of Tansley needed to have been listened to, and they weren't. They know the site, they knew the history of the site, and they were not listened to. I go along with what Councillor Hughes said about paying tribute to the parish council and indeed to the residents of Tansley, and particularly to those who live near the site and were put through extreme duress, I would say, and it was all unnecessary. We all knew what that site was like. It was a waste tip. There was no water supply, no access to essential services, no shops or anything like that in Tansley. Not to mention the issue of the badgers, and you know, you should have realised that. We told you that. Everybody told you that. So I hope we can learn some lessons there. But we've got to find a way forward now. I like the idea of what Mr. Johnson's come up with, but again, we need to talk to the parish council. We need to have an engagement with the residents there through the parish council probably, because at the end of the day, we've got to find a site. And I know our officers will talk to the travellers. They'll talk to them with Dr. Spencer. But this could, you know, dear, I'm so frustrated by this because we've had all this time and we're no further forward. And I hope everybody will look into their own consciences and realise that this need not have happened and shouldn't have happened.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I move on to anybody else to make a speech, can I find a proposer to continue the meeting on? Councillor Atkins. Seconded by? Okay, so thank you. All in favour? Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Salt.
Thank you, Chair. I think that members on that side of the debate, as Councillor Sue Burfoot puts it, are entitled to their "I told you so" moment. And I don't blame them for the comments that have come out with, well, not all of them. Lots of councillors on this side as well had doubts about this site, but this council has an obligation to find a site. And the fact that councillors and residents came up with reasons why this wasn't a suitable site, all of which have turned out to be entirely genuine, doesn't mean this council doesn't have to go through due process and investigate those reasons. Because for a party who sits on that side and quotes due process on a regular basis, I find it a little bit disingenuous that you don't follow that train of thought. Because if we went along with what you said and this council didn't, Councillor Burfoot, I was quiet while you were talking. I'd be grateful, Chair, if Councillor Burfoot would do the same. If this council listened to every objection but didn't follow it through and have a look at it and do the inquiries and the research and the reports required, then nothing would get built, nothing would happen, no proposal would go through because everybody has an objection to something. Now, I said that I had concerns about the suitability of the site, but that the reports had to be done and the money had to be spent because we've got to find a site, we've got to pursue a site. I guarantee whichever one comes up next will have the same problems. We'll have to pursue it. We'll have to see if it's suitable. We'll have to go through the checks and we'll have to spend the money because we have to find a site. So to sit there and say, we told you so, you should have stopped a year ago, this council can't do that. We've got to do the process. And even if we come to the end of that process and you're right, and it's not suitable, then that's when we stop. But we don't stop at the beginning because somebody says it's not suitable. I just hope you understand we have to go through the process because we are in a position where we've no choice but to find a site. Because if we don't find one soon, the government will just tell us where they're putting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I speak to this item, I'd like just to return for a couple of moments to what Councillor Purdy said in his leader's announcement about what we can practically do as a council to show our support or our disapproval, our total disapproval of what's happening in Ukraine. I've been privileged over the past few weeks to work with a number of families in my home village of Grindleford. And I'm very humbled to say that we will be one host family will be welcoming a family from the Ukraine in the very near future. And this evening I asked our civic chair if he would, with the host family's agreement, come up to meet and welcome that family to not just to Grindleford but to the Derbyshire Dales district. I do hope that members will endorse that request to our civic chair. That, I think, is one small way that we as a council can show our commitment to supporting those who are affected by the destruction in Ukraine. Turning to this issue, Chair, we had an extraordinary meeting in September 2020, 20 months ago. I've read the report, the report received. It doesn't tell me anything that our officers didn't tell us 20 months ago. We've wasted that 20 months. We wasted time, we've wasted energy, we've wasted money. But perhaps more importantly for me, we've antagonised a local community and we've let the traveller community down. So I hope, and what that says to me, that regardless of which side of the room we're sitting on, we've made an unholy mess of the situation. Totally unholy mess. Pig's ear of it. And I think we should be big enough to recognise that. And the way I would recognise it, and I'm going to propose it formally by way of an amendment to the recommendation, that we formally apologise to the local community for the distress we've caused to them and to the distress that we've caused to the traveller community. I'd put that as an amendment to the 5 recommendations, that we formally apologise to the Townsley community and to the traveller community for the distress we've caused them over the past 20 months. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have a seconder for that proposal, please? Councillor Raw?
I'm quite happy to second that amendment.
Actually, I'm sorry, Councillor Raw, you did leave the meeting partway through the debate. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm afraid to say you can't participate on that one anymore. Councillor Gamble?
I'll second it then on Councillor Raw's behalf. And yes, and as well as an apology, I very much like the idea of the wildlife thing, and if we could maybe move that forward a bit and move something like a community asset transfer, if that's what Tansley Parish would like, I think that would be a very nice gesture to go with the apology.
Moved and second on that. So I'd like to go to the vote straight away on this. Go.
Fully expected the remarks from the opposition, no surprise. As Councillor Salters eloquently said, we had to go through the due process. No matter where we've tried to put the travellers, there's been strong opposition. It was leaked at Clifton years ago. Sorry, Councillor Barefoot, I can show you the emails. Strong opposition wherever I have either tried to put them or they've gone. Strong opposition wherever we try. I personally cannot apologise to Tansley Parish Council. If an apology is given to me for the crimes committed at my home through this process, then I'll apologise.
Okay. Right, okay, I don't think that is relevant to any of this at the moment. So this proposal, read it out, please. Councillor O'Brien, can you just make it clear what you are wishing to add as
Councillor O'Brien,
amendment?
Sorry, Chair. I made some notes. Are you happy with this? I got that this council formally apologise for the distress to the local residents and the travelling community. Is that the essence of your...
For the distress caused, yes.
for the distress calls. Thank you, Councillor. So just to clarify, Chair, this is an amendment. This would be an additional number 6. The amendment is that this council formally apologise for the distress calls to the local residents and the traveller community.
So we're going to vote on that amendment as been proposed and seconded. So all those in favour of the amendment being added, please show. Oh. Have you got your pen and paper ready, Lucy? A recorded vote then, thank you. And this is just for this amendment. Sorry?
It's your discretion.
No, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. Can you call them out then? Thank you. Can you call them out, please? Or Lucy, please, can you call the members out in the alphabetical order? Because we're looking for a recorded vote.
Councillor Allison.
For.
Councillor Archer. For. Councillor Atkin.
Against.
Councillor Bright is not here. Councillor Buckler.
For.
Councillor Bull. Councillor Mr. Burfoot.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Burfoot.
For.
Councillor Buttle.
Abstain.
Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Cruz is not here. Councillor Donnelly.
Against.
Councillor Elliott.
Against.
Councillor Fitzherbert.
Against.
Councillor Flitter.
For.
Councillor Froggatt. Councillor Finesse.
Against.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Hughes.
For.
Oh, sorry about that. Councillor Hobson. Councillor Lees. Councillor Mr. Morley. Councillor O'Brien.
For.
Councillor Purdy. Councillor Ratcliffe. Councillor Raw.
For. I was here for that part of the debate, for the amendment.
Sorry, you've left the debate.
Not during the presentation.
Excuse me,
Okay,
Councillor
thank
Raw,
you.
you left the room upon this
Okay.
item. Thank you.
Councillor Salt. Councillor Shirley. Councillor Statham is not here. Councillor Sutton. Councillor Swindle. Councillor Wayne. And Councillor Wakeman. Against. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Chair, I make that 16 to 12 against with 1 abstention.
So that is lost. So we are returning back to the 5 recommendations. I've got one more speaker, Councillor Chapman, and then I'm going to the vote.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a comment on the "I told you so" comment. Yeah, you told us that there was contamination. You told us there were badgers there. You told us there was potential water contamination. As someone, and this was in the main anecdotal, as someone whose ward is as probably far away in Derbyshire Dales as from Tansley as you could get, and I work in a very technically orientated profession. Anecdote doesn't work for me. This didn't mean that I was for this or against it at the time, but I'm used to working in situations where proper analysis, proper reporting, proper investigation is carried out to provide the evidence, the proof for that condition. So our officers went about this in exactly the way that I would do it as a scientist. They examined, they analysed, they researched, and they came up with this, what we've got tonight. And I'm happy, I'm very happy for Tansley, because they were very obviously involved very locally. I'm happy that the anecdotes that were given have been proven scientifically. The local opinions, and I have to say this, and Councillor Burfoot, I remember implicitly, and it's engraved for me, one of the comments you made in the initial debate was the fact that you had a friend or was an acquaintance who had a caravan site near the Nab Hall site. Well, you mentioned a caravan site nearby. You mentioned it, all right, you mentioned a caravan site. And you said you'd spoken to the owner of that caravan site and they were frightened that they would go out of business if travellers were allowed to go on that site. Now that lends a light to your empathy shown towards the travellers. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, it has been proposed and seconded for the recommendations original. We are now going to go to the vote. So all in favour of the 5 recommendations, please show. Oh, thank you, that's unanimous.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask that wherever the written version of the recommendation, could you please pass it forward so our Democratic Services officers can have it for the minutes? Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Item 12, waste and recycling contract.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and get to the key points as quickly as I can, Chair, if that's okay with everybody in the chamber. I'm not going to go into the detail. I'm sure that members will have had opportunity to read the report and the attachments. Essentially, we have outlined the performance that we've had to date on the contract, which members and residents are well aware has not met the standards that we required of the contract. There is work still ongoing to work with Serco to remedy the situation and improve the service to residents. However, should we find ourselves in a position where we don't feel that's going to be achieved, we are proposing...
Excuse me, councillors, can you just be a little bit quieter? I'm sorry, but I'm struggling to hear. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We are proposing to move forward with the work that has been going on in the background that the members are aware about. There is a lot of work that has taken place, and as you will have seen from the attachment from Recircle Consulting, there is a qualitative assessment report in there on potential delivery options or models of delivery for the service. Having spoken to quite a number of members and residents about the service, I'm aware that there is a feeling that in-house service provision would be a preferred option should we not be able to remedy this situation. So we are proposing that we focus our efforts on doing a quantitative assessment of the in-house service provision. It is a significant piece of work, as I'm sure members can appreciate, which will take a period of time for officers to do. We can't do that on our own. We do not have that capacity. So as you will see from recommendation 5, that we are asking for supplementary revenue from the waste and recycling reserve to appoint an external consultant to help us undertake this work to provide further analysis of the feasibility, practicality, and the implications of a possible in-house service provision. In addition to that, myself and the Chief Executive have been having discussions with neighbouring authorities to consider shared or partnership arrangements, and we would request that we have the flexibility to continue those discussions alongside doing the, further analysis of in-house service provision. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's not a lot. I don't want to go over everything again. We've spoke about this many, many times. But my question is on 2.7, when we talk about in-house service model, we talk about the risk, but I don't know any detail really of the level of risk. I know it's pertaining to 100% risk to the council for the whole operation, but whether it's high, low, medium or whatever risk on certain issues, I would like a little detail. But I mean, that is the only concern I've got on this. I mean, the rest is for debate really, but I would like to suggest that when it comes, I'd like to move this because I think that the officers need that support in the work that they've done. And we've already talked tonight about how important it is to have our officers on board and the sterling work they're doing. And I would like to carry on in that theme and support them. But because the most important thing to me is we have a perfect or near perfect situation for our residents, a scheme that enhances staff properly and gives them all the help that they can get, and also the recompense that they deserve, because we're not talking about staffing on here, we're talking about the operation of Serco. And the other thing is the control. I believe that the control that this council can have on an in-house thing, if the risk is not significant, because risk to me in any business is part of that business, and we all take precautions to get that risk. So I would like a little bit more risk, but I am pleased to move this when the time comes.
That is your movement. Do I find the seconder?
I'll be happy to. Sorry, Chair, I'm happy to second that. I think this is a particularly important piece of work that will give us a lot of illumination going forward that we need to ensure that we are in a position to fulfil our obligations.
Thank you for that. Okay. Rob, would you, Ash, sorry. Have you got a comeback on the question?
Yeah, I can do, Chair. Thank you. In terms of risk, what we mean by that, Councillor Flitter, is any fluctuations in commodity prices such as plastics, cardboard, glass, because we get a return on those, but the market is quite volatile at the moment. As it stands in the current contract, that level of risk is shared between ourselves and Serco. If the service is operated in-house, we will be subject to 100% of those risks. It isn't just commodity values or prices. It could be, for example, the HGV driver situation, increases in labour fees or the labour market, inflation in rates of pay, or whatever it may be. Currently, there is a shared risk because we're working with another partner. There is contractual obligations on those partners. If we operate that, we are subject to responding to that and taking 100% of those risks.
Thank you, Chair, but we should, if I just carry on, we should be mitigating those risks as we go through this process. And as long as that's taken on board, I'm quite happy.
Thank you. I think this is just for the case of going out and doing the studying first to come back with the costings. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to second this if I was going to offer to, well, I was going to offer to move it first,
Okay.
and then Councillor Pritter got in first then.
Not a problem. Have you got a question?
I haven't got a question.
Then we'll continue on if you don't mind. Thank you. Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Chair. I recall when we reviewed the independent report that was done at Council that I was told that the management information system would be implemented by the 25th of March. Is that not taken place, and have you got another date for when they're proposing to do that? Also, I've just noticed coming around Doveridge that there is an unliveried vehicle that's being used. How many are there that Serco are using, and are we renting those? Are Serco renting those vehicles to complete the rounds as well? Thank you.
Chair, if I can, in terms of the work on the MIS, that work is ongoing and is hopefully closing to completion. It hasn't been completed within the timescales that we were initially presented. I know that Paul has been in discussions whilst I've been on annual leave. I only came back this week, but I believe, and I'm looking at Paul, that it should be completed by July, along with the round optimisation work, which is key to round efficiency. In terms of unliveried vehicles, that's not uncommon, Councillor Allison. It was the same on a previous contract. If a vehicle breaks down, hire vehicles are brought in. Without having any more detail, I can't give you anything more specific than that. I can certainly ask the question, but if a vehicle is in for repair or is out of action for whatever reason, then a contractor will bring in another vehicle that is most likely not tagged up, it doesn't have our branding or logos on it because they need to still operate the service. So there are a host of reasons why that could be.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, it's been,
right.
Can I just
No.
go back? No, I do need to say this because that vehicle has been on the round.
Right,
for the last
hang on a
2
minute. I don't
months.
really see what relevance on this question is as regards as going for the operation appraisal.
Can I
So I'm
say-
sorry, then we're not continuing. So no, you can't come back. So Councillor Swindle.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. I really welcome this paper. Although I will be honest, I've seen improvements in recent months in the standard of service in my ward. There are still problems that crop up every now and again, and they're frustrating problems with Serco that they just repetitive and don't seem to go away. And I know that you know, we've got further problems coming down the line where we may anticipate having to pay even more. So I think this is common sense. I think it's something that we definitely should be doing, and I really, welcome the approach that Ash and his team are taking. I know how much work you have done over the last 2 or 3 years on waste contracts as it is. I'm sorry you've now got even more work to do. I hope all members will give officers the time and space they need to get this in place. The only other thing I'll say is a shame Councillor Slack isn't here because he would absolutely love this. So if he is listening, Peter, I hope you're happy that we're moving towards something you want.
Thank you for that, Councillor Swindle. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I do so agree that the primary aim of this council should be the restoration and indeed stabilisation of the service provision, but I'd like to see it done without the involvement of Serco. Sometimes it's better not to follow the path of least resistance, but to take a hard decision that ultimately will prove beneficial for long-term outcomes. What I'd like to ask is when you feel the results of the stage 2 quantitative assessment will be ready for deliberation by this council, and perhaps rhetorically agree with me that it should at least be available as an oven-ready option, if I can use that much derided description, for the new 2023 council.
Chair, thank you. I don't have a time frame specifically for completion at this moment in time, Councillor Ratcliffe, but we would need to move very quickly on this. 3 to 6 months, but closer to 3 months would be ideal. But please don't hold me to that. It's a significant piece of work that needs to be undertaken. It's a complex piece of work, and I think the suggestion that I've had from one of the elected members in a discussion earlier today is that we should have a workshop with members, as we have done in the lead up to procuring this contract, because it is a complex issue, and I think there'll be a number of matters that we would probably look to get members' views on, and also just inform as we go through the process. And of course, having those milestones in place does delay the process a little bit, but as officers, we're working towards as a quicker turnaround as possible on this.
And if I may just very quickly come back, can I just make a simple suggestion that all the quantitative and qualitative assessment that was done prior to the award of this contract, if you remember, we held some very good workshops then and were presented with an in-house assessment at that time option, would be useful as a comparator with what the costs, etc., will be in the future, as it were.
If that's possible, of course, Councillor Ratcliffe, I'll dig out the whole paperwork and see what I seem to recall the matrix that was presented. I think it was presented by one of my colleagues, Steve Capes, at the time, but we will have a look at that. I mean, I think it is worth noting that the market is different now to when even 2 years ago when we looked to award this contract. There has been a significant change. COVID has had an impact on the market, but of course we'll do as close a comparison as we can.
Thank you for that. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, this is probably a question for Tim, actually. Sorry, look of shock on your face there. This would turn the emissions from this contract from Scope 3 emissions to Scope 1 emissions. And it would be really good to make sure that that doesn't cause a risk for the authority in terms of fulfilling our climate change obligations. So, because I understand that Serco have been difficult in terms of enable us to calculate our Scope 3 emissions. Is that correct? And is it possible for us to sort of keep that out of as a way of prejudicing any decisions which are made on this?
Thank you, Chair. Sadly, that is a question for me. I thought I got away with it for tonight, but there we are. You're quite right, Councillor Buckler. The transferring the service in-house would bring what are currently Scope 3 emissions into our Scope 1, and that's unavoidable. Joe and I have already started considering that. The situation as regards to Scope 3 emissions is we don't have all the information from Serco. There's been other more pressing matters that have needed to be sorted by Ash and his team and Paul over time, but we're aware that we need to do that. The reality, of course, is those emissions are real, whoever owns them. And I suppose if we wanted to be optimistic about it, bringing a service in-house would mean that we had control of them.
Can I come back? Is it all right if I come back on that? I'm not saying that we shouldn't disregard them. I'm saying that we shouldn't use that as the reason for not doing it, because I think we should be counting the Scope 3 emissions from the work at the moment, but obviously we can't.
Yeah, we have every intention of counting the Scope 3 emissions at the right time. Our other major partners, Freedom Leisure, have been very cooperative in that, thanks to negotiating with Becky, actually. So we would move on to Serco when the time is right, regardless of what happens. We will look at it.
Thank you for that, Tim. Councillor Shirley, looking at the time again.
Looking at the time, can I propose an extension?
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Martin Burford, thank you. All those in favour? Against? Four. Okay. Well, abstentions? No. Okay, so we're going to continue on till we get this item sorted. Okay, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair.
Question.
Just a couple of questions. Firstly, a rather rhetorical question. Could officers please avoid using the term administrative burden when they talk about the possibility of bringing the service back in-house? To me, we provide one of our duties is to provide this service to the residents. And it's not a burden. It's a pleasure. It's an opportunity. So please don't use that term to describe bringing it back in-house. A couple of linked questions then. I support the principle of bringing the service back in-house, but I'm open-minded. Can you tell me which neighbouring local authority we are in discussions with regard to the potential for a shared service? And can I be assured that if those discussions look in the least bit fruitful, that we will get a full report on the feasibility of that approach to coincide with the completion of this stage 2 assessment, so that we don't then have the possibility of a big time lag between those two options.
Ash?
Thank you, Chair. Given the sensitivity around the situation and with respect to those authorities, I won't be mentioning who they are in a public forum, Chair, with the greatest respect to members. I hope you can appreciate that. We have had a number of discussions. What I will say is so far that those discussions have been encouraging. In terms of a report or feasibility report regarding that, those discussions are ongoing at the moment, which is slightly different to what we're proposing for the stage 2 report on an in-house service provision, because essentially if members approve that this evening, we can get on with that work. I'm not sure we're in a position to progress a stage 2 report or a feasibility report with another local authority at this stage. So to say that it would marry up at the same time I can't give that assurance, members. I'm sorry. What I can do is report back to members on that progress at a later date. But I would advise that we press on with the work in terms of getting a deeper analysis of an in-house service provision as well.
Thank you. Councillor Raw.
Just a couple of quick questions, Ash. One is the Serco contract. The risk in terms of fuel prices, is that one that's shared as well with Serco?
Yes, it is, Councillor Raw.
Okay, thank you. That's useful to know. And my other question is just in relation to the labour market, and we live in the Dales, and we know that lots of employers struggle to recruit people. Have you got any thoughts on that at this moment in time?
It's a challenge, Chair, if I may, through you. It's a challenge for us in other service areas, such as our clean and green team. We do have some difficulties with it, but we're a good employer. We offer good terms and conditions. The culture is a positive one, and if it was in-house, we would look to try and recreate that as we do elsewhere within other departments. The labour market is what it is, and we do, as we do in many other areas, compare ourselves to local competitors, what's happening in the public sector and the private sector, and we try to be competitive. The challenges will still be there, and that's one of the risks that we talked about early on.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got nobody else on my list as regards questions, so I'm going to move back to Councillor Flitter. Sorry? Oh, sorry, I didn't get that one. Oh, sorry, Councillor Buttle. I did have you on the list. Sorry, Councillor
sorry.
Buttle, he was on the list, sorry.
Oh,
Thought it might have been.
Well,
Great, when we're briefing our consultants, will we be able to use the member group of waste? Yeah, we've got a group that we will they be involved at all in the briefing? And will we have the option to do a certain amount of restructuring so we can outsource bits, insource other bits, keep it as flexible as possible so that any problems don't snowball into some sort of monstrosity? And also my residents are really very, very keen on us taking it in-house. So yeah, I'm going to be supporting this.
Thank you, Chair. I think it has been useful to have the advisory group working with us over the last few months. I think there's been some constructive input and it's been positive. So I'd like to see that continue. That's a decision for members rather than me, but I would be happy to support or get involved with the advisory group. In terms of whether we insource or outsource, we're talking about insourcing. I mean, some of the contracts that we'll have with disposal sites will obviously be with contractors, but in terms of the collection service itself, we're looking at an in-house provision for that.
Thank you. Councillor Gamble, your question.
it is a short question, because I did ask some others earlier, and it's just a clarification really that's come up with this discussion. I'd kind of read the report that we were going to look at a sort of equal analysis of in-house versus with as well the local authority company model. Could just confirmation we are going to look at all those? I think it would be really good to have those all costed, particularly if we are going to look flexibly in as well.
The recommendation, Chair, is that we look at the in-house service delivery model and we cost that up. This is a significant piece of work. If members wish for us to analyse every option that's available in here, that will take more time. If we want to respond to this situation and we need to do it quickly, we need to focus our efforts in a particular area. And the reason that officers are proposing an in-house service delivery is because that has generally been the sentiment that has come back from the chamber.
I see. It's the definition of the word in-house. I kind of thought that was two options that were kind of in-house, but not. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to move back to Councillor Flitter. If you wish,
Yeah, just to say, Chair, that I'm sure that Ash will take any opportunity to get information and support from whoever. And I do hope that Serco will look at this tonight, and it might increase productivity because they may feel that their time is coming to an end.
Thank you for that. So it has been proposed and seconded. So I'd like to go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. It's unanimous. Thank you. We've got to. Okay, then, unfortunately, we did extend the meeting, but it was just to clarify that final item. So I'm afraid that any more items that are on the agenda are not going to be taken tonight. So with that, I close the meeting. Thank you, all members.